In the early 1970s, America was emerging from a tumultuous decade marked by social upheaval, the Vietnam War, and a growing counterculture movement that emphasized trust, openness, and breaking down traditional barriers. It was an era when hitchhiking was common, when many young people still believed in the fundamental goodness of strangers, and when the concept of the serial killer remained largely absent from public consciousness. Against this backdrop of relative innocence, a man named Theodore Robert Bundy would shatter the nation's sense of security and fundamentally change how society understood predatory violence. What made Bundy particularly terrifying was not just the brutality of his crimes, but how thoroughly he defied every stereotype Americans held about violent criminals. He was educated, articulate, and conventionally handsome. A law student who had worked on political campaigns and volunteered at a crisis hotline, the kind of person who seemed destined for success rather than infamy. Ted Bundy was born Theodore Robert Cowell on November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont. His early life was marked by a deception that would shape his psychological development in profound ways. For much of his childhood, Bundy believed his grandparents were his parents, and that his mother, Eleanor Louise Colwell, who had given birth to him out of wedlock at age 22, was actually his sister. This family's secret was maintained to avoid the social stigma of illegitimacy common in that era. Eventually, his mother moved him to Tacoma, Washington, where she married Johnny Bundy, who adopted young Theodore and gave him the surname that would become synonymous with serial murder. Despite his later claims of a normal childhood, Bundy was described as an intelligent but increasingly withdrawn child who struggled with social connections. He threw himself into academics as a way to isolate himself from family and peers, a pattern that continued through his years at Woodrow Wilson High School, where he recalled choosing to be alone and avoiding social situations. After graduating in 1965, Bundy attended the University of Puget Sound for a year before transferring to the University of Washington to study Chinese. There, he experienced a devastating romantic rejection that coincided with his discovery of the truth about his parentage. Events that many experts believe contributed to his psychological deterioration. He switched his focus to sociology and urban planning but eventually dropped out, later returning to graduate in 1972. By all outward appearances, Bundy was a young man with potential, working in politics, and preparing to attend law school, yet beneath this carefully constructed facade, something far darker was taking shape. The murders began in 1974, though Bundy himself would later deny any killings before 1973. And investigators suspected his involvement in unsolved cases dating back to when he was 15. On January 31, 1974, Bundy broke into the basement apartment of 21-year-old Linda Ann Healy, a University of Washington student who broadcast morning weather reports for skiers. She vanished without a trace, the first in what would become a horrifying pattern. Between January and July of 1974, Bundy killed at least 8 women in the Seattle area, including Donna Gail Manson, Susan Elaine Roncourt, Brenda Carroll Ball, and Georgine Hawkins. Investigators would later note that Bundy's victims shared striking similarities. They were typically in their early 20s with long, dark hair parted in the middle, a profile that matched the woman who had rejected him years earlier. His method was calculated and chilling. Bundy often approached women in public places, pretending to be injured or disabled to gain their sympathy and trust, sometimes using crutches or wearing a fake cast to appear vulnerable. In other instances, he impersonated authority figures, claiming to be a police officer to lure victims into his tan Volkswagen Beetle. Once alone with his victims, Bundy would overpower them, taking them to remote locations where he would sexually assault, murder, and often return later to perform acts of necrophilia and dismemberment. The investigation was severely hampered by jurisdictional fragmentation and the lack of coordinated communication between law enforcement agencies across different states. As Bundy moved from Washington to Oregon, Utah, and Colorado, local police departments struggled to connect the disappearances and murders occurring in their separate jurisdictions. However, a critical breakthrough came on November 8, 1974, when 18-year-old Carol DaRonch encountered Bundy at a shopping mall in Utah. He approached her claiming to be a police officer investigating a break-in to her car. Once inside his Volkswagen, Bundy attempted to handcuff her, but DaRonch fought back ferociously. She managed to escape with one handcuff still dangling from her wrist, flagging down a passing couple, Wilbur and Mary Walsh, who helped her reach safety. Hours later, enraged by his failure, Bundy abducted and presumably murdered 17-year-old Deborah Kent. On August 16, 1975, a Utah Highway Patrol officer pulled over Bundy's Volkswagen and discovered what would become known as his murder kit in the trunk: a crowbar, handcuffs, trash bags, an ice pick, and other suspicious items. This discovery, combined with Carol DaRonch's courageous testimony, led to Bundy's arrest and conviction for aggravated kidnapping and attempted criminal assault in 1975. As he sat in jail, investigators across multiple states began connecting him to the growing list of unsolved homicides. Facing murder charges in Colorado, Bundy engineered two dramatic escapes that demonstrated both his intelligence and his desperation. After his second escape in December 1977, he made his way to Florida, where he would commit some of his most heinous crimes. On January 15, 1978, Bundy broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University in Tallahassee and attacked 4 women. In less than 15 minutes, all within earshot of more than 30 witnesses who heard nothing, he murdered 20-year-old Margaret Bowman by strangling her and fracturing her skull, and 20-year-old Lisa Levy, whom he strangled, sexually assaulted with a foreign object, and bit deeply into her buttock. 2 other women, Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler, survived with severe injuries, including broken jaws and facial fractures. Bundy then attacked 21-year-old Cheryl Thomas in a nearby apartment, fracturing her skull and jaw in multiple places. He was finally captured on February 15, 1978. And the forensic evidence that would seal his fate was already being processed. Bundy's trials became media spectacles, among the first to be televised nationally. He acted as his own attorney, cross-examining witnesses and delivering opening statements with the confidence of someone who believed his intelligence could overcome the evidence. But the prosecution's case was overwhelming. Carol DaRonch provided crucial eyewitness testimony, and forensic odontologists matched bite marks on Lisa Levy's body to impressions of Bundy's teeth. A pioneering use of forensic evidence that would influence future criminal investigations. Fiber evidence linked Bundy to the crime scenes, and multiple witnesses placed him near the attacks. On July 24, 1979, a jury found him guilty of the murders of Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman, and he was sentenced to death. In 1980, he received another death sentence for the rape and murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, his youngest known victim. Throughout the lengthy appeals process, Bundy attempted to prolong his life by confessing to additional murders, ultimately admitting to 30 homicides across 7 states between 1973 and 1978. Though many investigators believed the true number was far higher. On January 24, 1989, Theodore Robert Bundy was executed in Florida's electric chair. Britannica https://www.britannica.com/biography/Ted-Bundy. The legacy of the Ted Bundy case extends far beyond the individual tragedies of his victims and their families. His crimes exposed critical failures in how law enforcement agencies communicated across state lines, directly leading to the creation of the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, or VICAP, a federal database designed to track and connect violent crimes nationwide. The case also advanced forensic science, particularly the use of bite mark analysis and fiber evidence in criminal prosecutions. Perhaps most significantly, Bundy's case contributed to the development of criminal profiling and changed public perception of serial killers forever. Research conducted after his execution revealed a psychological profile characterized by antisocial personality disorder, psychopathy, narcissistic traits, and a complete lack of empathy. Experts identified his antagonistic traits, including deceptiveness, manipulation, and callousness, combined with superficial charm and fearlessness that allowed him to move through society undetected for years. The Bundy case also catalyzed the victims' rights movement in America, as the predominantly young female victims and their families demanded better support systems and more compassionate treatment within the justice system. This advocacy led to the Victims of Crime Act of 1984, the development of victim impact statements, and the expansion of campus safety programs and self-defense education. Bundy had proven that evil does not always announce itself with obvious signs, that predators can hide behind charm and education, and that society needed to fundamentally rethink how it identified, investigated, and prevented serial violence. His case remains a watershed moment in American criminal justice, a reminder that vigilance and systematic investigation are essential tools in protecting the vulnerable from those who would exploit trust and compassion for the darkest of purposes.